Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Eric Vento, and welcome to yet another episode of Government to Private. Today, we have Jim Bernier with us. Jim is going to talk about his transition out of law enforcement to the corporate security world, and we could not be more excited to have him and his background with us this evening. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it. We've been connected on LinkedIn and talked quite a few times about some different things, and never really got a chance to sit down in a formal manner like this. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. Well, without further ado, man, let's jump in. Can you tell us a bit about your background, starting with law enforcement all the way to present?
Yeah, absolutely. So right out of high school, I went into the Marine Corps. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I did my 4 years active and got right on. It was lucky. It was early 90s and they were hiring left and right. And I jumped on with Hartford PD in Connecticut and ended up doing 20 years there. Retired as a captain after 20 years. And, during that time, my career there kind of ran the gamut from patrol to investigations. I did traffic unit. I ran the SWAT team for about my last 7 years, up until the time I got promoted out of it, because rank wise, they don't allow captains to run the team. And so once I got promoted to captain, I was kind of sitting on the sidelines, but still kept my finger on the pulse. And during that time, I did almost 17 years on the team itself, and it's a part-time team. So the camaraderie that you build over that period of time, but then even in my other roles, the investigative roles, I did our juvenile investigations unit for quite some time, and had some phenomenal detectives in there that really just hit the ground running with some terrible, terrible cases. And really just putting all of that together and building those relationships kind of led me somewhat to where I am today, because picking, to me, one thing that really helped my career along personally, and maybe not for everyone, but picking a mentor, and not formally, but just looking at someone that you look up to that is doing things the right way, doing things for the right reason, and really just emulating, what they're all about, and really just learning and building that connection. And there was one individual, chief of police, that I worked with. He was my lieutenant in the juvenile unit for a number of years, and then he got promoted to deputy chief. I ended up taking his spot when I got promoted to lieutenant, and years later, he called me up on a Friday and gave me the choice to say yes, into a very not a very well liked role, dealing with internal discipline throughout the department, and so kind of taking the IED cases after they're done and dealing with it from that end. But that really taught me a lot. I'm not a lawyer by trade. I never will be. Not for me. More power to them, but it's not for me. It's not something that I could do. And I learned a lot in that role, dealing with different aspects of the government, within the city, because I had to deal with the corporation counsel's office. I had to deal with the mayor's office. I had to deal with the chief. I had to deal with the union president. I had to deal with the officers, build those relationships, and also sometimes, the things didn't go well in some of those meetings. And people aren't always happy when they're getting called to task on certain things. And that was probably one of the, I don't want to say worst times of my career, because I learned a lot, but it wasn't the most fun. And then I ended up retiring as a captain back in 2014. So this September will be actually July. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was. Yeah, you know what? It was 10 years and 2 days, man. I'm getting old and dating myself here. Yeah, 10 years and 2 days ago, retired. And it's funny because the way the private sector works that I found, It's very similar, but very different. And again, building those connections. My first job out of law enforcement, I was security operations manager for Connecticut Children's Medical Center. And before I retired, I was doing their active shooter workplace violence training with them. I helped them co-write their policy. And as luck would have it, I was getting ready to leave. And I talked to the director of safety that was there. And he's like, hey, we might have an opportunity. So I jumped on board there, thought it was a great opportunity. I was there 4 years to the day. And it was exciting because I didn't know anything about healthcare and I didn't know anything about the private security world. Love to just really dig in and learn. And although because of my son and his accident-prone days, I was a frequent flyer at the Children's Hospital. I knew my way around a little bit. I didn't know the whole hospital. And it was a big learning experience dealing with all of the different department heads, the different, I don't want to say attitudes because it's not attitudes. I'm still friends with quite a few people from that hospital, but the different personalities.
Yeah.
Learning, and learning to deal with everyone from that C-suite executive at the hospital down to the 4-year-old patient that's coming in for a chemo treatment. It makes you think and makes you really appreciate what you had in law enforcement. But it also shows you that the grass is green. It might not be greener, but it's green everywhere you look.
I like what you said about, you were able to parlay an existing relationship into a job. And that's probably one of the top 3 pieces of advice that I give to everybody is, yes, the transition to the corporate sector is difficult, but one of the best things that you can do is utilize your existing network. And that includes the vendors that you work with. I talk to so many people on a frequent basis who are like, oh, I have a digital forensics contract with Magnet, or I have a physical security contract with Allied, or, whatever the case may be. And I'm like, well, you're already a known quantity to that vendor. You don't have to convince them of anything. And so, one of the first questions that you should be asking is, okay, who do I know who's currently in the corporate world? Either friends, professional contacts, vendors, whatever the case may be, that you may not have to have the same experience that most of us do. You can parlay your existing relationship into a role and hit the ground running, so to speak.
Absolutely. And, really just in investing in yourself during that time. Because right when I got out of the PD, I didn't know much about LinkedIn. I had heard of it. And so I got my account going probably, I want to say maybe a month before I retired. And started just making some connections in the security world, thinking that, hey, maybe that's really one thing that drives me. It's something that I want to do. And just starting to make contacts. And so my first week at the hospital, again, I knew nothing about hospital security, and hospital security, as well as I do, it's a different animal than just regular security, just because of the not just the HIPAA issues that go along with it, but the patient-family relationships, the different personalities with the C-suite. And so you have to really marry all of those things. And I knew, again, I didn't know much about it. And so I looked up, what organizations that healthcare security could belong to. And I found IHSS. And I reached out to the local Connecticut chapter. And at the time, and I reached out to him on LinkedIn. And at the time, he was the chair, and he threw me probably a good 2 to 3 big bankers boxes filled with books. I mean, again, this is back in the, back before we could email all these massive documents and, go online and find things. But he brought them over to me. He goes, listen, I'll come to your hospital and I'll walk you through what you need to know to get started. And he had sample policies. He had, different schedules, how you could do this, how you could do that. And anything and everything I wanted. And we became good friends. And we're still friends to this day. Our sons actually played baseball together a little bit down the road years later. His son was a lot younger than mine, so my son was actually helping coach his kids' team. So it was a great connection there as well. And again, just building that relationship, and good things come to an end, but things happen for a reason. And I just happened to look on LinkedIn one day, and I saw an opportunity pop up for a security provider out of Long Island, New York, looking for a Connecticut regional manager. And I put in, it was an easy apply, threw my resume right in just for the heck of it. Not that I was unhappy in my job, but it seemed like, hey, this is the next step, because
Right.
I'm at the top level of where I'm at my job right now. And this seems like an advancement. So long story short, I get a call for an interview. After my second interview, I go down to their corporate office, and I'm sitting across from the gentleman who would later on turn out to be my boss, and he was their VP of operations. And we're halfway through the conversation, and he says to me, he goes, you really look familiar. And he's a retired New York detective, and we couldn't piece it together. And he goes, well, you did SWAT, so were you present when we did, and we had a big tri-city roundup, and it was or tri-state roundup. It was New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And I was there, and I had the team for my portion of the briefing. And he goes, that's where I know you from. And so the interview kind of just totally tanked at that point, and it was, reminiscing about that. And I left with a solid offer in hand, and I started 2 weeks later.
Love that. That's
You
awesome.
know, and so it's that relationship building, and we didn't establish a relationship, but we had that same mindset, and we had that familiarity that we could talk the same language, and so that really helped me out. Again, it's things happen, and that's what I got to say is the scary part about the corporate world. Businesses change, people change, jobs change. It's always stressful. It doesn't have to be scary. But our company was bought out by a large provider, and I didn't accept the offer from the incoming provider. And I found myself, for the first time since I was 14, looking for a job. Now, I had my pension, so I was doing okay. But I just happen to, really just, I still want, I'm a grinder. So, get out there and, make something happen. I looked on LinkedIn, and I had I was following a company out of North Carolina, Sun State Security. And I happened to message their COO at the time, just out of the blue, because I knew that they had their Connecticut license in my talks with the Connecticut licensing board director, who I was friends with. And so I reached out, and I said, hey, do you have anything up in Connecticut? And, just, looking for an opportunity. And everybody in the industry kind of knows, when a company gets bought out, and they know what happens. And just jokingly at the end of my message to him, I said, and if by chance you got something down south where I can golf year round, I'd be more than happy to, consider it. 24 hours later, I got an email from HR. I was on an interview. 2 interviews later, they flew me out to North Carolina, made me a job offer, and my wife and I packed up and moved down to Georgia. It's, things happen, and it's, good things happen, bad things happen, jobs change, but there's always something going on. And I was with that company for a few years. And as most recently, NBC Universal made me an offer to work right down the road from my house and not have to travel around the Southeast US too much. And I've been with NBC just over a year now. And again, um, that that company treated me well, treated me great. The employee satisfaction rate there is through the roof and for a good reason. But as life happens, I was given an opportunity from a prior connection, and I'm starting that job this coming Monday. And I'm moving back up to Connecticut.
I love
So
it. It's kind of like coming full circle.
yeah, and and again, when things like that happen and you look at the big picture, yeah, it's a scary move, but it's a great transition move for me. It's a great opportunity, and if I can give a little bit of advice to anybody, I mean, just try. You never know what you're gonna miss out on if you don't try. Give it a chance. And the relationship building, and you hit that nail on the head a little while ago. Relationships are really the key, because I wouldn't have this current opportunity, excuse me, if it wasn't for a relationship that I built with a few certain individuals from my previous company who, you know, ended up recruiting me and bringing me on board. Um, and the culture fits, the people fit. I think it's going to be a great opportunity, and it gets me and my family back together. My son's going to be moving back up there when he's out of the Navy, and we're just bringing everybody back home. So it's going to be a great opportunity.
I think you're like a poster child for how relationships can really just increase your overall outlook on life. Like I said, obviously in the corporate world, stability overall seems to be a pipe dream.
Yeah,
You never know when you're going to get laid off. You never know when the business might decide that your position is redundant. That's just a fact of life.
yeah,
That's one of the main differences between law enforcement and the corporate sector. But, you know, being active and intentional in how you engage other people and build relationships can really be a massive force multiplier in your professional and personal life. And I think that, your story is really good evidence of that. My own story, the past 4 jobs I've had have come through network,
yeah,
and people reaching out saying, "Hey, I think you'd be a good fit. Are you interested in having a conversation?" And, just like you said, if you don't try, you'll never know.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, there's no guarantee that if you try that something positive will happen. You may strike out, but I think any of us who have any kind of measure of success will say that we've struck out more than our fair share of times, but we keep swinging,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. And with those relationships, um, the networking that comes from that and with that, just reaching out to people out of the blue. LinkedIn, it's a fabulous tool if you use it correctly. Um, and when people I wish I had your service available to me when I was transitioning out, because resumes are one of the bigger keys that, well, hey, throw me your resume and I'll check it out. If you have that military style or strict law enforcement style resume, it's going to read that way. And to somebody who it hasn't been there, they're not going to understand it. And I know you get that. And I know a lot of people hear it, but it really doesn't seem to resonate, because even resumes that I see coming across the desk every single day, it's a lot of them are the same thing. And
Yeah.
you want to give that guy an opportunity, but you've got to kind of read between the lines to figure out what he or she actually did.
Yeah, and a lot of
And
it's guesswork.
yeah,
You're looking at a job title and you're looking at, okay, what kind of department is this? How big are they? What kind of opportunities do they have? Does patrol officer mean the same thing here as it does there?
right.
And that's a whole other tangent I could go down about how, job titles are super inconsistent across the
Yep.
board, and it's not a one-to-one from company to company. But, also, just like you said about articulating your experience, I regularly talk to people who are just like, I just don't know how to do that. And that's fair. That's
Yeah.
a fair comment to make, but nowadays there's a lot more resources that exist out there on how to
yeah.
do that successfully. And, you talked about the mentoring aspect early on. When I transitioned out, I was fortunate to be mentored by Chris Almonroad and Scott Walker and Derek Nevis, and then a little bit later on in my career, I was fortunate to be mentored by Brian Tuskin, and having a mentor at the onset of your transition to kind of walk you through, well, what about this and what about that? Because there's so many different situations that come up, and what may work well for you may not work well for somebody else, and vice versa. But it's still
Yeah.
really good to have that context.
Yep.
And but also to keep a mentor as you transition through your career.
Yeah.
I remember.
And it may be different people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, you named, 4 or 5, and, and you may have that one crutch that you can always go back to just to ask a question out of the blue. And I think it speaks volumes to a boss, quote unquote, when people, reach out to them, whether it's months, years later, and, hey, can I pick your brain about something? I got a question for you. To me, that feels really good. And I've done it multiple times to people that I've worked for,
Yeah.
and with, I mean, even, coworkers or people that have worked for me. I mean, listen, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I won't claim to be. You got to surround yourself with people that, get the job done. And some people know more than you or I, and in certain areas. And reach out to those sources when you need to. And and build that bridge. I tell my son all the time, build that bridge, don't burn it. Maintain that relationship.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times, I've reached out to Brian or Chris and said, "Hey, I ran into this situation at work. I really don't know which way to go. I see pros and cons on both sides. What do you think?" And these are guys with, you know, at least a decade, sometimes 2 decades more experience than I have at much higher levels of corporate security. And the higher up you go, the more your perspective changes, I think.
Yeah.
And I was privileged to learn from those individuals, and to really kind of let them coach me on the best way to approach those specific situations. Because just like in law enforcement, when we're presented with gray areas, you know, and there's a multiple of different ways that we can go, each with its own consequences and stuff like that. The corporate world is no different.
Yeah.
And being able to just bounce something off of someone who has been there and done that, and who has been wildly successful over the course of their career, is a blessing that definitely shouldn't take for granted.
Absolutely. And one of the things you said just resonated with me, and really just taking a look at where things are and who you can reach out to. It's knowing your surroundings. It's kind of, just being that, being mindful of really what is going on, not just in your life, but in your career, but in other people's. When you invest in other people, it comes back to you. So it's, you reach out when you need to, and answer that phone when somebody calls.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Is there anything else that you wish you would have known before you made the jump?
Well, like I said, the resume builder part, I thought I had a decent resume coming out of the Marine Corps, and I kept it going, building it through the PD times. But man, I actually save a copy of it now to laugh at and look at, just by the way it's written. It's, to me, in the professional setting, that's kind of that's your business card before you have one at a
Yep.
position, and when you present that, that's who you are. And so to me, I think the biggest part of transitioning from law enforcement is getting out of that direct law enforcement mindset. I've had countless people say to me, well, how do you make that jump from being a street cop or being a police officer to going and either sitting behind a desk or being in the corporate environment? Are you, can you handle that? And it's, I have been on job interviews where, hey, well, do you think you're capable of handling that? Well, yeah, I've been retired almost 10 years now, so yeah, I think so. And, but some people know, some
Yeah.
people never lose that mindset.
Yeah.
And I think I've been successful in my career. I've had setbacks, as we all have, and you live and learn. But
Yeah.
man, I'll tell you, it's a wild ride if you take that leap and exit out of law enforcement. I have a couple of good friends who are still in, and they constantly say to me, man, I wish I could get out. I wish I could get out. And one of them, a close friend of mine, he just retired as a chief of police, and he got picked up by a hospital as a director of security. And him and I talked probably about a half a dozen times during and in between his interviews. And I don't know if I should take it. I don't know, and he didn't want to leave his PD. But he knew it was time because of the opportunity that he had presented to him. He was successful at the PD. I told him, you're going to be successful here too. And I gave him the same clues and same pointers that my buddy gave me, when I got into healthcare security. I'm like, listen, join IHSS. And he had no idea what it was when I first talked to him about it. I said, dude, you got to join this. You just make the connections, join the Connecticut chapter, go to the meetings and just meet people. Because if you have a question, you automatically have somebody to call. The first time you get called up to one of the nursing floors and they want to know, well, why is security doing X, Y, and Z? And you have no clue. Well, you can either go ask your security officers why they're doing it, or you can call that guy that you just met at the last IHSS meeting and say, hey, what's going on with this? What's behind what we're doing with this? Or, hey, can you give me help with writing this? I don't want to, recreate the wheel here.
Yeah.
And it's,
I love that.
And, it's kind of, just like, from the police department side, if chief tasks you with, writing a new policy on something, 99% of the time, you're not going to sit there and try and retype or type out the whole thing yourself. You're going to call somebody from a neighboring department, or even do what I did at one point and just poll all the large regional SWAT teams in the area and just say, hey, this is what I'm looking for.
Right.
And again, at the time, it was before the LinkedIn time, but it was through the NTOA website, and it was a chat room for SWAT commanders. And I put it in there. Hey, I'm looking for this. I had responses from Boston, from LA. I mean, and great. That's what I'm looking for.
Right.
Pieced it all together, and it was exactly what I needed. It was a combination of about 5 departments' input, and it worked. So and we do the same thing in the private sector. I mean,
absolutely. I gave a lot of advice, obviously. And I think the number one piece of advice is talk to as many people as you can, especially the people who are in the roles that you see as remotely interesting, or at the companies that you want to work at, just to get a sense of, hey, what does your day-to-day look like? What's the culture? What's the workplace like? How are the benefits? What's the compensation? Obviously that's subjective, but it's still good to know.
Yep.
And, by having those conversations, you can start to narrow your focus.
Yeah.
What do I think I want to do? What does that job actually look like beyond what's written on the job description? And I think a lot of people are just like, obviously from a cop mindset, we don't like talking to strangers. We're not a big fan of airing, hey, I'm looking for a job. How can I do this better? It's just it's a
Yep.
strange foreign concept for a lot of people. And talking to someone or messaging them cold on LinkedIn is a super foreign concept. And
Yeah.
so, when I tell them, yeah, there's a whole world of us out here who have transitioned successfully, just reach out and ask for help. They're like, what?
Yeah.
But once they do, and they're like, wow, okay, now I know what to do, or now I have an idea of what to do.
Yeah.
And I just think that's if you can kind of jump over that little hurdle, I say little, in quotes,
Yeah.
but if you can jump over that hurdle and start having conversations and start realizing that, there's a whole lot of people out here who are invested in your success.
Yeah.
We want you to have the answers that you need. We want you to have the information you need to make an informed decision. And it just takes, kind of going back to that try that you brought up,
Yeah.
talking to people who have made the transition before you and just getting a sense from them, like, hey, what was it like? What
Yeah.
should I do? How should I prioritize my time? And a lot of this depends on where you are in your journey.
Yeah.
Are you a year out from retirement? Are you, 2 days out from retirement? Did you get fired? Are you on medical leave? Whatever the case may be, but it's never too late to try.
No, and there's opportunities for everyone out there. It might not be exactly what you have in mind or
Yeah.
what you think it's going to be right away, but there are opportunities. I had friends that were retiring that, well, I'm only going for a chief's job. Well, you might have to, start a little lower or,
Yeah.
or even pick up, if you can jump into a different PD at the lieutenant's level or captain's level, great. A lot of PDs don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's a tougher move. And, do you really want to be a chief? What is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
And,
Is it just because it's the next rung, or do you have something specific you want to accomplish?
right.
Right.
And when you're in these corporate roles, like the guarding industry where I was at and where I'm going back into, man, when I got out of the PD, I thought I knew about scheduling and balancing a budget. You from the PD side, unless you're the chief or unless you're working in the fiscal side of the PD, you really don't. You have no clue. And listen, I'm a Marine, not a mathematician. So I hit up my CFO at the first security company that I worked with, and I was on a budget call with him, and I said, man, you're talking way over my head. I don't understand where you're coming from with this. He said, let's book some time and let's talk
Yeah.
about it. And so him and I got together multiple times. And then after a few months, when we got on these budget calls, he would just sit there and, yeah, run your numbers. And I would run the call. It's because I really dug in and paid attention to what he was talking about, but we maintained that relationship for years down the road. And I reached out to him when I was with a different company years later and said, hey, I got a question for you about X, Y, and Z. He's like, oh yeah, do this. And he answered his phone right away. It's because you build those relationships and you go back to just that mindset of ask if you need something. Don't be afraid to nobody's going to think you're a failure for asking a question about something or asking for help. And man, there are no failures out here. We survived. We're out here doing it, and there's always opportunities. And these organizations that are out there now that are, I mean, there's huge ASIS, IHSS,
ATAP.
yeah, and and that's growing. That one's getting huge. And there's a lot of opportunities even within those. You build one relationship and you talk to people and, oh, hey, I know this person.
Exactly.
And
It's crazy how how interconnected we all are.
Yep.
even if we don't know someone personally, odds are we have a second level connection that links us,
Yeah,
and, with all these different organizations, obviously you have to have a conversation with yourself and say, okay, where am I going to invest my time and my resources?
yeah,
It's like the whole certification discussion. Should I get a cert? Should I not? It's the same thing with these organizations and joining the chapter meetings and stuff like that. It's like,
yeah,
okay, which one aligns best with what I think I want to do in the future and what fits within my time and my financial constraints,
yeah,
you know, and, having been involved with ASIS for a number of years, as well as ATAP, having gone to GSX on a number of different occasions, I can honestly say that the networking you get there, independent of the education that is offered is truly invaluable.
absolutely.
Even building relationships with vendors, who have booths there. I mean, yes, they want to sell you something. Yes, they're there to, generate leads and build relationships, but you never know if that vendor might be your opportunity to a full-time job.
Yeah,
You know, I can't tell you how many people who, use Axon or Motorola or Flock Safety or any number of these different, platforms, and then they wind up working for them,
yeah,
because they were able to use them in their law enforcement or corporate careers. They were able to establish the relationships. They were able to achieve a SME level understanding of the different products that they were using. And that suited them well to go and do an account executive or a customer success role, and like I said, you just never know what the outcome of your intentionality is going to be.
yeah, yeah.
What other advice would you give people who are considering the transition, Jim?
Um, take your time. Don't unless you have to get out of where you are. Um, take your time, find the right move. Don't just jump into, if you're say a street sergeant and you're getting ready to retire, you got your time in, and you know a a 9 to 5 security officer job might not cut it for you unless that's the mindset that you're in, that hey, all you want to do is, you want to go and you want to have this. I don't want to say a coast of a job, because there's work to be done in any career field, in any position, in any security officer, security manager, any role. But make sure that it's what you want to do. Have that passion and have that drive. Like I said, when I transitioned out, I was going around the city teaching all of the active shooter workplace violence courses for different businesses, and so I had that passion there. And we had done a couple of mock drills at the hospital, and it, one equaled two, and the opportunity presented itself, and I jumped on it. And it was great. I mean, established some great relationships. It started my career path in the security industry.
I love that. Yeah,
It really did. And it put
absolutely
me,
love that.
put me right into the fire, because I had to, just building that whole program and doing what we did at the hospital. It showed me that I knew what I was doing and I could do it. So it
Yeah,
gave me that inner confidence, and not that I didn't think I could, but until you really do it, you don't know.
yeah,
You're a SWAT cop going through a door. You can train all you want until you go through that first door, and when you do, you're nervous as heck. And then once you do it, okay, all right, now I'm good. You're still nervous every single time. Somebody tells you they're not. They're fooling you a little bit, but it's you really you bear down and just know what you want, know what you're doing, and
yeah,
if I can say one thing to people, do it the right way. It's, particularly in the corporate world, cutting the corners and trying to take care of something. It's you really you gotta watch yourself, and you gotta do it the right way, because it's going to be not only your career but your reputation. And the industry is big, but it's small.
yeah. I was talking to a chief of police earlier today who's transitioning out, and he was just like, tell it to me straight. Like, how difficult is this? And I was like, well, that's a really subjective question. It depends on a whole host of different factors. But I was like, think about it this way. You know, when you went into law enforcement, you went through a 6-month academy on average. Then you went through a field training program that was probably another 6 months. And then, you know, maybe you had some additional training before they released you to ride by yourself, you know, depending on how your specific agency did it. I was like, you don't have any of that in the private sector. You know, it's day one, let's go. You
Yeah,
know, and obviously there's a transition, you know, there's a training program and stuff like that, onboarding, depending on the role that you're going into. But, you know, as far as transitioning your mindset and transitioning, you know, your, okay, how is this going to go? What is this going to look like? How am I going to deal with A, B, C, and D? You know, it's not a, I guess the word I'm looking for, it's not a, like in the academy, it was almost like a no fault environment.
yeah,
You know, like you were allowed to mess up, you were allowed to fail, you were allowed to make mistakes. And the threshold for doing that in the private sector is a lot lower. You know, we're working at businesses that are for profit or nonprofit or are
right.
at, you know, under regulatory scrutiny and any number of
Yeah,
different other concerns. And, you know, that's what I said to him is, you know, the bar for failure is a lot lower.
yeah,
And you just have to understand what are my expectations, you know, what I guess realm of opportunity can I operate within? And a lot of that will be taken from your direct manager,
yeah,
you know, but it's just a lot different.
yeah,
And I was like, honestly, you're not going to have a problem with the work. You're going to have if you have a problem with anything, it's going to be the mindset, you know, because I don't care whether you're transitioning voluntarily or involuntarily, it's still a kick in the teeth, you know, because, you know, whether, like I said, it's just hard to make that transition from a lifetime of law enforcement to,
it is. And you second guess yourself too. You know,
yeah,
did I do the right thing? Did I do it at the right time? Could I have stayed a little more, maybe built my pension up if it's a retirement thing? Um, you know, but really then you look back at it, and if you did make the move, even if you think it might have been the wrong move, it wasn't, because you know what, you're survived, you're out, you're doing what you need to do. All right, maybe you could have gotten that pension up, maybe you could have stayed on an extra year and gotten that last promotion that you wanted, but now you just build your own path.
exactly,
It's, you know, there's
exactly.
there's opportunities there's relationships to build, there's people to meet. But again, just, you know, yeah, just do it the right way, and but put your mind to it and do it.
Yeah.
You know, reach
And
out.
rely upon others,
Absolutely.
you
Don't do,
know,
yeah, you can't do it yourself. You definitely cannot do it yourself. Um, I would not be in the position I'm in today if I tried to do everything myself. And, you know, I talk to people. I get out there, I network. It's, you know, if somebody needs a connection somewhere, if I don't know the person personally, I probably have a connection on LinkedIn that does.
yeah,
And if I don't, I have somebody on LinkedIn who has that connection who knows somebody who does. I mean, and it's as simple as just putting a message out there and just saying, "Hey, I need some help with this," and you'd be surprised. I mean, and I follow the ASIS daily bulletins that come
yep,
out, and you know, I have the Atlanta Southeast chapter one, the ATAP one. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, things out there, and people ask these questions all the time, and I've chimed in on a few of them, you know, with some answers. Hey, you might want to try this, or here's my email. Just shoot me a message, and I'll send you that file. Um, and you know, people do it every day.
yeah.
Um, it's, you know, don't rewrite anything, and don't recreate the wheel. Just you know, yeah. And
Ask
sometimes
for
you want
help,
to, sometimes you want to build your own program, and
right?
that's perfectly fine, because that's how we learn. But you know, just get in there and do it, and
I
have
think
fun
that's
doing it.
I think that's the theme for this entire conversation, Jim, is just get in there and do it.
Yeah,
You know, don't be afraid to ask for help. Just try, you know, find your move, find your time, And, obviously if you can, and, that's one thing that I wish someone had said to me,
Yeah,
when I was coming out. And ultimately, that's why I do what I do now,
yeah.
is to hopefully give people the information they need to make a better decision than I did. Um, making
Well,
mistakes is part of being human, but we can definitely make our lives a lot easier by relying upon the wisdom of others.
yeah, no, and I've seen the backstory of what you're doing, and you do a great job with it, and it's it's needed. And for these guys out there, considering if they need to talk to somebody, if you don't have someone that you kind of hold in that role, you're the ideal person. There's a couple of organizations out there, you're the ideal person that, listen, have the conversation. Maybe it's something, maybe it's not, but it's at least worth doing or giving it a shot, because it could put you over that next hurdle. And maybe instead of getting that director's job, you get that senior director's job.
Yeah.
That, when you throw your resume in because of the way you have it written.
Yeah, because I think that the last thing I'll say before we close this out is, senior leadership, executive leaders, they're not hired because they know everything.
Right.
They're hired because they have the ability to find the answer. And I think that's, a skill set that isn't just unique to senior leadership.
Yeah.
You can start now. You can start by building relationships and understanding, okay, if I need to know this, here's who I go to, or here's where I can start, and I think that's applicable to so many different areas of life, not just our professional mindset. But Jim, I just want to really thank you for participating in this podcast and just sharing with us your wisdom and your background. I think one thing that I really love about doing this is, I think every single person says something that resonates with at least one person.
Yeah.
And it hits them where maybe they just needed to get hit. They say it in a way that really stands out to them, really resonates with them. And I think what you've kind of given us tonight, the relationships, the LinkedIn, the IHSS, just try, all the way down the line is going to resonate with quite a few different people.
Oh yeah.
And
Over the years, by doing that and reaching out to people, I've never had someone say no. And I can tell you that I've never just flat out said no to someone. I've told someone, hey, I can't get that for you right now, or I don't know how to get that, but I can help you out.
yeah,
No one is just going to say no.
absolutely.
No, it just doesn't happen. So yeah, no, and I appreciate you, man. You do a great job, and I wish I had your services when I was transitioning out. I really do.
Well, even if you did, brother, it sounds like you wouldn't have needed it, man.
Hey, and lucky star, man. Lucky star. I appreciate it though.
Well, I appreciate your time, brother, and thank you so much for sharing with us this evening.
Thanks, Eric. Stay safe, huh?
You too. Bye.
Appreciate it. Take care.